Well, Bill, welcome to a photographic life. Welcome to the conversation. Welcome, as I say, every month. How are you doing?
I am doing just about this side of medium.
Okay, well, for anybody based in the States at the moment, I would suggest that that's doing fantastically well.
Yes, I think medium is the new fantastic.
Exactly. It's like the new black.
Yes.
Okay, so just to let people a little bit behind the scenes, you and I occasionally drop each other an email and say, "Shall we talk about that next month?" And sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. Sometimes it's my choice, and sometimes it's your choice. And this month, it's your choice. And you mentioned about turning jobs down. Do you want to sort of pick that up and sort of explain what instigated that?
Yeah, so there was recently in the photo community here in the States, um, there was a bit of a kerfuffle because a fella named Patrick Whitty, who has worked at in the past Time Magazine and National Geographic as a photo editor, and then lost his job due to some claims of sexual harassment. That seemed to be quite serious. Um, and that was some years ago. He's recently taken a job as the chief photo editor for the White House, for Trump's White House. And when I saw that, setting all of the history, which I don't really know much about, setting all of that aside, I honestly couldn't believe that anybody would take that job because my personal political beliefs are that President Trump is trying to destroy our democracy. He's hurting, thousands and thousands of people every day. He's cruel. He's a moron. He's just anyway. I could go on and on and on. But why somebody would take a job that helps to burnish this monster's image, I thought was really interesting. And it made me think about the jobs that I have turned down in the past and those I have accepted. And so that's why I thought it would be interesting to speak about this in terms of um, how we make our choices. To say yes and accept a job, or to say no and walk away.
Well, I'm sure he's not the, well, we know he's not the only person with a sexual harassment, whatever it is, history in the White House, that's for sure. That almost seems to be a requirement.
I guess I should also say that the article that kicked all of this off, a lot of discussion online, had a lot of factual errors. That article said that he was a White House photographer. He is not. He is a photo editor. He's the chief photo editor. And there were some other inaccuracies, or sort of implied inaccuracies in that story that you know I think is a problem in and of itself. But
Well, when
yeah.
we're in a world of fake facts, so we're ever more kind of careful, aren't we, about seeing things and what's being said and so forth. I know I just watched the Bob Dylan film, and there's so many historical factual inaccuracies in that for dramatic effect.
Right.
And then I spoke to my wife afterwards, and she was like, "Oh, wasn't that true?" And I was like, "No, that wasn't true." So anyway, there you go. So here's the thing. I think that raises two interesting points, doesn't it? One is in a tough economic situation, it's very hard to turn down a job. And so that raises, okay, we could talk about it politically, but it also raises ethical considerations. And I think perhaps for me, turning down a job falls into two areas, ethical and financial. And certainly I've spoken to a lot of photographers over the years, professional photographers, and I've encouraged them to turn work down for a financial reason. So should we kick off with the ethical and see where that takes us?
Yeah. I might want to add another category, which is creative. Um, and we can talk about that as well. But I think I would like to talk about. You suggested talking about ethical first, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think like, in the case of Patrick Whitty, um, personally, my ethics wouldn't allow me um, to work in that situation. And yet, when I think about his career and what seems to be his interests, he's um, quite a student of photo history and how things kind of fit together. And I think, it's possible that being on the inside of history, as opposed to looking at it, 50 years later, 30 years later, even 5 years later, could be quite intriguing for somebody like him.
Well,
Which, you
it's
know,
the Lenny
it,
Riefenstahl argument, isn't it?
well, tell me what that is.
Well, I was just doing my job. I was creating Triumph of the Will to kind of make the Nazi Party and Hitler look as successful, as triumphant as possible. But I was just doing my job.
So I think this might be a little different because I think it's possible. And again, I'm positing here. I have no idea.
No, me
But
neither.
but if a person is really interested in something that you and I feel is ethically dubious, should I be offered a job at Soldier of Fortune magazine, about mercenaries and merchants of death and weapons, I would turn it down. But if I was really interested in the psychological aspects of people going into wars where they have nothing to fight for, it could be really interesting to be on the inside of that.
But I think the problem that I think we might even have quite a rigorous discussion today, Bill, because I think the problem with that, and why I raised the Lenny Riefenstahl, which is a bit of a clumsy sort of hammer to bring to a fight, as it were. But I think that the issue isn't just about going in there and being kind of inquisitive or interested. You have to also to take that say some responsibility for what you're actually doing. So if you're going to go into a situation and make that person, and let's just pick anybody, it doesn't matter. We don't, we're talking about specifics. Let's talk about generalities. If you're going to go into an environment and you're good at your job and you're going to make that other person look better, you're going to have to take a responsibility for that.
I could not agree more. And when it comes to choosing the best photo that makes this person, whoever it is, um, look good when this person is actually, in the Riefenstahl case, when you're making Adolf Hitler look like an emperor, when you're shooting him low to high and the background is full of red flags and it's just powerful image, you are helping to propagate propaganda.
Yeah. Well, you're right. You're not. You're creating
You're
propaganda.
creating it.
That's really what you're doing. Now, what I suppose you could say, well, I need to do it. I need the money. I need to earn a living. Okay. Or I'm going into it because I find it really historically interesting. And isn't it amazing to be part of that? But I listened to a podcast series called The Great Dictators. And it's fascinating when you look back at hindsight in so many of those great dictators as to how they came about. And if you are a photographer, a filmmaker, or a writer who has helped those dictators in growing their power, well, you know, are you complicit?
Well, I mean, I think you absolutely are. Let's move it away from politics for 1 second and think about if you are shooting an ad for a cigarette company
Mm.
or a vape or whatever it is, something that say causes cancer that we know causes cancer. you're going to get paid a lot of money to take the photograph of the Marlboro Man or whatever it is. Um, you might get some creative license. You might be proud of the photograph because it's a guy on a horse and it looks fantastic. And yet, you have to take responsibility for the fact that people, if successful, will look at your picture and be like, oh, maybe I'll have a smoke.
Well, yeah, I mean, you raised that point, and the moment you said, I instantly thought of the British photographer Duffy and his images for Benson and Hedges in the 1970s, which were perceived as being great works of conceptual photography, and actually weren't that much different from the work he was doing for David Bowie at the same time. So, he obviously didn't see any issues there with that conceptual. I must speak to Chris's son and ask him about this, but certainly, they are still seen from a UK perspective as being hugely important works of their type at the time. And of course, they were funded by a cigarette company. But at that time, did we have as much knowledge about cigarettes as we have today? We probably had a lot, but perhaps
Right.
not quite as much. Whereas from a political perspective, we know a dictator is a dictator. That hasn't changed.
That's true. I guess so. Are we where you want to be when we're talking about the ethics, or are we moving toward that?
I don't know, actually. I think that, you know, ethical decision a photographer makes has to be between themselves and themselves. At the end of the day, if you take that dollar, if you take that pound, you're going to have to live with that decision you made. Maybe that ethical decision, we would like it to be an informed, considered ethical decision, but perhaps the power of the payment or the power of that sense of ego of being around those kinds of people and being part of that. Perhaps that's also part of that kind of allure.
I think so. And as you were talking, I was thinking about the distinction between, say, working in the White House and your boss essentially is the person whose boss is Donald Trump, versus if you're hired by Time Magazine to be the White House photographer for
Mm.
Time Magazine. You know, it's a very, it's a you may be taking the same kinds of pictures of the same events and the same moments and the same people, but and you may feel some internal pressure to take um, good looking pictures because you want to keep your access. You don't want to be kicked to the curb and lose that position. But, you're reporting news from a Time magazine perspective as opposed to from a Donald Trump perspective
But
or a
okay, let's maybe try and move this on. Is the ethical issue actually who's paying you rather than what you're actually doing? Because if you're being paid by, we're going to have to use Trump as an example because he's right there in front of us. If you're being paid by Trump, he's going to control the pictures and you're going to take the kind of pictures he wants. I mean, that last time he was in power, all of the photographs that came out of that were totally horrendous. And of course, all of the images that came out of the Obama period by Pete D'Souza, if I'm right.
Sousa. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, were amazing, great images, really interesting images, but they were still a form of propaganda. They
Right.
were showing that everything was great. In fact, it was quite interesting. Maybe this is part of a thought process as well. I was hearing something the other day, and they were talking about Trump that he actually his entire world or understanding of the world is based on his life from between sort of 1980 and 1984, or maybe a little bit before 1980,
Mm.
and therefore his music, his clothes, everything his decisions in life are based on then. So if you're going to be working as a photographer, you better really understand photography of the early 1980s because that That's what he's going to want. But
Right.
anyway, I go off a slight tangent there. But I just wonder if you're going there and you're doing this work for AP, is that okay? But there again, all of those images of him being shot, which we spoke about at the time, were used as propaganda by him, but were not created as propaganda. They were
So
created as
you,
news.
oh, so you mean during the assassination attempt?
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Right.
So that
Um,
was propaganda as far as he was concerned.
as far as he was concerned, but it wasn't shot. It wasn't shot or edited as such.
So
It
there
was
was
used.
no, yeah, so there was no ethical problem for the photographer for that
Right.
other than usage.
Right.
So
So if the photographer had sold the image to Trump um,
that would be a
for
problem.
for obvious use as propaganda, that becomes a problem. So, and that's sort of a second order problem because the photograph was taken from assuming a more neutral perspective.
Yeah. So the ethical decision is really complicated.
It is.
I mean, that's the reality of what we're saying, isn't it? Is that taking on that job, you can put all different kinds of connotations of taking on any job, working for anybody, and you can actually get yourself in a whole load of confusion or
Yeah,
not care.
um, exactly. I have um, turned down jobs or job possibilities in the past because I was uncomfortable with the subject matter. I was asked, do I want to apply for the editor-in-chief job of a magazine that is known for taking pictures of naked and near naked women and great literary tradition, et cetera, et cetera. Um, Not something I could really see myself doing.
Sounds like
Uh,
Playboy, Bill.
it sounds like it, but there are a few others like it as well. Um, there's another magazine that I declined to have a further conversation with the top job there, which is a magazine for very, very, very rich people, and it's kind of about the things they should buy. And you know, nothing is a crime there. It's not giving people cancer. I just the whole idea of propagating the materialistic kind of heartbeat of wealth just didn't appeal to me, and I didn't feel like I could do interesting work and promoting that kind of lifestyle.
But that's very interesting. You've raised the point of doing interesting work because if you could do interesting work, would that overcome your ethical concerns of the kind of consumerist element to it?
In this case, probably not, because the magazine had such a heritage of buy this, buy that, buy this, buy that. Here's a Rolls Royce, here's a expensive, $500,000 watch, which I just think, when there are people hungry in this world, that I just couldn't get my head around that. But like I did take a job working for Maxim magazine back in the late 90s when they came to the US. And so that was a magazine that was somewhat mischaracterized. It was considered a lad magazine. It started in England, as you know. Felix Dennis was the owner. Um, there were pictures of women on the cover and inside. They were always dressed. Um, but it was a funny magazine, and we could do really creative, whacked out stuff that you couldn't do in any other magazine, and it really did change the way for a while men's magazines were conceived from the voice to the kind of stories, and I found that was interesting.
It's funny. A good friend of mine was one of the people who went over to the States and set it up.
Who's
So
that?
I'm not going to say name names. Big Arsenal fan. He was a big Arsenal fan. He used to
Was he
come
an
over.
art director?
Ah,
An
no,
art director?
no,
Oh.
no. In the
Hmm.
editorial side of things. Anyway,
Hmm.
Used to go up to Felix Dennis's place. I think it was upstate New York. Felix had a big house and up there, and
Well, he had houses everywhere. He famously had an estate on the island of Mystique.
yeah, and a sculpture park. Well, anyway, the one up in upstate New York, he would let members of staff go to and drink the cellar dry, which
Interesting.
some friends of mine once did. Anyway, we go off at a tangent. I mean, it's interesting you talk about that because obviously I spent 9 years at Tatler magazine, very much that kind of aristocracy and wealth and money, and not something that sat well with me at all. But I suppose, proving your point, I always felt myself as kind of an observer of this world that I would never have got access to in any other formal way. Um, and so,
Did you have any misgivings about either taking that job or staying at that job?
no, because I saw myself as a sort of anarchic force within it.
Well,
I
so that's really interesting. And I saw myself at Maxim as a moderating force. Um, Someone who would say, you know what, that's actually really offensive. We're not doing that. We shouldn't do that. Looking back, I do want to say that there are stories that we tell ourselves to make ourselves feel better about the jobs we do. Like
yeah.
in the first Trump administration, there were the quote unquote grown-ups in the room. You know, these were conservatives who had a lot of experience and expertise who decided to stay on Donald Trump's team so that they could wrestle the nuclear codes from him, at the moment of a precipice, you know,
Mm.
um, and seemingly they did what they claimed to be doing, although they also legitimized his power.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is always that thing of telling yourself a story, and perhaps that is something that a lot of photographers might maybe will suggest are guilty of. That when times change and hindsight comes in, that you can kind of reconsider that. I mean, I always used to say that, you know, I was the one who put sort of Leonard Freed or William Klein or Sylvia Platschi. I commissioned them in this magazine that they wouldn't have been commissioned if it wasn't for me being there. And so I tried to bring that. But interesting, if we go back to those days, so we've got an ethical thing here, with photographers, and we're always, it's very important, I think, that photographers are aware of the ethical elements of what we do, you know. And so that is a problem. And I don't think we can come up with any kind of solution to that or set kind of formula that this is what you must do, other than whatever decision you make, you're going to have to live with it.
I mean, I just think it's worth really considering what the ramifications of your participation in a project are.
Because that
Short term.
could be an exhibition as well as anything else. I mean, there's a lot of discussion around photographers putting work in an exhibition, and then there's somebody else's work in that exhibition, and suddenly you're aligned with it.
Hmm, right. That's interesting too. Um, on the other hand, you might have a family that really depends on you. Um, you know, I'm in a different place in my career now where I can make choices than I was when I was, 24, 25, 26 years old, or even when I was first married and had a kid. So, the decisions you make when you are younger and poorer might be different. There's different leverage that's brought to bear on you. And
But do you think we're in different times now as well, that those kind of ethical considerations are more important now than they perhaps were when we were younger?
I'm not sure. When I think about the Vietnam War and civil rights and all those kind of issues, I think things are more public now. I think there's obviously a lot more virtue signaling and the threat of cancellation on social media. Maybe, I mean, I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
But there still is the pressure, very real pressure, and I don't, I hopefully we're not um, passing judgment on people who make decisions that you and I wouldn't make at this moment. I mean, by talking about Maxim, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's probably not a job I would take now, but you know,
But I don't think
I
it's the kind of magazine that would exist now. And I think, that's a really important part because when you were talking about all of this, and I was thinking about my time at Tatler in the 90s, I've been reflecting a lot since I wrote that book that came out the other year.
I
And just in general, I've been watching things and thinking, wow, the 90s was a very different decade in lots of different ways. There didn't seem to be the sense of fear that there is now.
Mm.
There is a real sense of fear now, I think, globally, and therefore it's even more important that we make the right decisions. Whereas back in those days, it seemed a little bit more kind of, uh, you know,
Well, but again, the right decision is, do I take this photo assignment? And let's not think of it as a long-term job of a year or more.
mm,
Let's just call it a photo shoot, that would pay pretty well, and would sort of take care of my family's rent and food
mm.
for a month or two. Um, that those are real considerations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't feel like I'm in a position to say, oh no, you should never take a job. Because every single job, almost maybe every job, no matter what, um, is complicated,
Mm.
has drawbacks, and requires compromises, whether they are creative, ethical, financial, whatever. And that's why they pay you to do it.
Well,
Um,
let's move on to that because um, I think we've bounced that around and come to absolutely no kind of set outcome, which is perfectly good, I think. Hopefully, it's made other people think about stuff. But one of the things I've done a lot over my career, and I think probably one of the most common conversations I've had with photographers, is photographers saying that they're unhappy with their client base or they're
hmm.
unhappy with the work that they're doing. And therefore, how can they change that? And I've always said the same thing. You're going to have to start turning work down. You're going to have to start saying to those clients, I'm sorry, I'm not available. And in doing so, you then need to create a whole new client base um, of new people based on new work. And the process of doing that might be difficult. You're saying no.
Saying no is so hard.
Yeah, it is hard, but at the same time, it has an outcome that could be positive.
I think that we need to really respect how hard it is to say no. And I'm not disagreeing with anything you just said because I 100% agree with it. But speaking from my own experience, I tell myself I need to leave more space for myself to do, some creative writing, to do more creative work. And then somebody will call me and they'll say, "Hey, we have this really interesting thing. Are you?" And I'll say yes because the money's okay. It is interesting, and it's just frankly hard for me to say no. But when I say yes to them, I try to remind myself I'm saying no to myself.
But here's the reason for saying no is that, and you know this as somebody who commissions, when you're commissioning somebody, you get a job and you say, oh, Bill can do that. And then Bill will get a certain fee. Or you can say, wouldn't it be good if we got Bill to do that? And then Bill gets a higher fee.
Mm.
So you have to, at different stages of your career, take yourself from they can do that to wouldn't it be good if they did that? And unfortunately, and I have said this, and we've spoken about Jake Chesham on the podcast before. Jake will tell you, I gave him this information. He did do it. I don't think he worked for a few months. And then it got to the wouldn't it be good
So
situation.
in other words, you're saying it's the same work, but by saying no, you create more of a sense of scarcity? Or tell me, like, spin out what you're saying exactly.
So what I'm basically saying is, if you're always available, if you'll do it for the reasonable amount of money, and you're in that kind of mindset of the commissioner, and that you're always kind of, yeah, I can do that, I can do that. Oh, I haven't got very much money. Oh, that's okay, I can do it. If you're in that pot, you will stay in that pot, and it will keep you there. And creatively, it can be frustrating, and financially, it can be frustrating. So, what you have to try and do is get yourself out of that pot into the new pot. And the way to do that is not be quite so available to those people, but also at the same time, find new clients that you establish a new relationship with, in at which you are the wouldn't it be good if. So you're basically repositioning yourself. So we often talk, don't we, you and I, about pivoting. Well, this isn't kind of pivoting. This is literally kind of going, I was here and now I'm going to be here.
But so I understand the first part of that, the playing hard to get, you know.
Well,
Um,
yeah, but also not being available. So if they keep giving you the grotty jobs, you don't want the grotty jobs anymore. That client may well also have good jobs. So you want to get the good jobs. You see?
right. No, I mean I understand that, but so you make yourself unavailable for the I've never used this word, the grotty jobs.
It's a London thing.
I assumed as much. Um, how does that take you to the higher level or different level of jobs?
Well, the idea then is use that time you're spending and not taking on those lower paid jobs, you spend on trying to get new clients and better clients. So it's not one thing on itself. It's two things working at the same time. And so you're working on those higher end clients whilst you're trying to lose those lower end clients, but you'll still work for the lower end clients, but you'll only do the higher end job for the lower end client. Do you see what I'm saying?
So you're taking a moment to invest in yourself,
Yeah,
is is what you're doing.
that's put much more clearly and effectively than
Got
what
it.
I was trying to do and say.
Got it. So, but when you are talking to the new clients in the work that you want to be doing, you are saying yes to them.
Oh yeah, but you're
Yeah,
saying yes to them at a higher rate
at a higher rate.
for better work.
Right.
You see, because I think, and what happens is quite often, I think that when photographers or writers, you start out at the beginning, there's nothing nicer than when somebody phones up and says, "Would you do this?" Because there's an element of kind of validation.
Yes.
Suddenly you think, "Oh, somebody does love me." Somebody does think I'm good, and
But
we can be fooled into to taking on jobs we shouldn't do.
but it is also true, I think, you know, saying no strategically, even if you keep wanting to do the work that you're doing, saying no from time to time, just to say no, just to say, you know what, I'm so busy with these other clients, with these other assignments, it does actually make you more sought after. Uh,
Absolutely,
when
absolutely.
when you're at a certain level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying this is kind of like straight out of the gate. This is after a few years of working.
Yeah, no, I guess what I'm saying from a, this is a slight, you were talking about the saying no to enable yourself to sort of change a class of client or a class of subject matter. I'm also saying if you want to stay right where you are, it's also not a bad idea once in a while to say no, I can't. I'm too sought after to do this. Um, because I think, you know, people do uh, sort of take notice of that. People
Yeah,
take notice when you say no to a job, people take notice.
If you say no to a job and say, look, I can't do it. I'm so booked up at the minute. I'm really sorry. It doesn't matter if you're booked up or not.
Right.
Perception is all. And the reality is you're still the same photographer, you're still doing the same work, but the perception of you changes. And that's actually what that's the other reason, I suppose, for saying no to a job. And in a way, I think it kind of links back to the ethical thing, because if you're saying, actually, I didn't take on that job. I could have done it. It was a load of money, but it didn't feel right. My perception of you is like, that Bill, he's a good guy. He's got some ethics, you know. So there's lots of different kind of transferable kind of elements to this of around saying no. It's not just saying no. It's got lots more to it.
I mean, when you read those books, if you ever do, about exerting power in the boardroom or in the
Uh,
workplace or whatever, um, what they typically say is the most powerful word in the English language is no.
yeah, yeah,
No, no.
yeah. Okay. I'm going to say it's why. I think why I prefer why to no. But is it, the amount of times I've been in with a client and they've gone, oh, can we do this, this, and this? And I go, no, not really. Not really. I think it'd be better to do this. And they're like, why? And they suddenly think, oh, he's got an idea and he's
Mm.
strong enough to go with it. Um, I did once did a big pitch for the champagne people, Veuve Clicquot, and I'd forgotten to write the pitch, and I turned up at their offices, and they said, "Oh, can what's this thing going to look like?" And I said, "It's going to look like nothing you've ever seen. It's going to be incredible." And they were like, "Okay, but how long do you need?" And I said, "A week." And they were like, "Okay, um, right, okay, well, let's do it." you know. But actually, what I'd really said to them is, no, I'm not going to go down this road of showing you pictures and showing you mood boards, and I'm just not going
Well,
to do.
so you said no without saying no, which
Yeah,
is also very smart. There's another way. Um, Let me ask you this: as someone who has commissioned so much and so often, has a photographer said no to you and your reaction was not positive?
um, I think the saying no. I'm just trying to think. I can't think of anything in particular, but I do think that it's how you say the no.
Hmm.
I think you've got to back up the no. You can't just seem petulant or disruptive or dismissive. And I can probably, if I really racked my brain, come up with a few examples of those.
Well, let me ask you. If we're talking about the position we were talking about a moment ago, when you want to start saying no to certain clients or certain jobs because you want to evolve a little bit. So Grant, if I were to offer you this assignment and you were going to say no to me, how would you do it in a way that's not standoffish, it's not condescending, it's not
I
screw
think I'd
you?
I'd always say the same thing. I'm really sorry. I'd love to do it. I'd love working with you, but I'm really busy at the minute, and I've just got no availability. Um,
So how does that though send the message that I want to be doing your better work or
because what it does is it takes me away from the Grant will do it to wouldn't it be good if we got. So it changes the perception of the person who is commissioning by actually thinking, rather than thinking, oh, it's Tuesday, I need somebody Wednesday morning. Oh, Grant will do it. To, oh,
but
we've got this great big job coming up. Let's see if he's available.
but when you say no, should you say what I'm really focusing on now is um, portraiture, or
No,
should you say thank you very much, I wish I could?
I think the latter. I
Uh-huh.
think the moment you say, "Oh, and now I'm doing this, so I think I should be doing this," you're instantly saying to them, "Well, don't commission me for anything else."
I totally agree.
You're giving out the wrong signals
Right.
So, maybe saying no requires as kind of a general response as possible. Don't get yourself into the situation of detail. It's just, I'm sorry, I'm really, really busy at the minute, and that
But,
makes you seem good.
but let me press you a little bit more because how does the client know what you want to do unless you're explicitly saying, I want to move away from shooting product and more to shooting portraits.
If you're doing that, I think that's a different thing because that's not changing client, that's changing area of practice.
Okay. So
So
let's be
that's
more
a different kind of
let's
thing.
so let's be more accurate. So instead of this kind of product, which is a quick turnaround, and it's going to show up as an inch by an inch wherever it
Yeah.
is, you want to shoot something more beautifully lit, higher profile.
I just want a better job. Yeah. I just want to, instead of getting the quarter page, I want to get the front cover
So
or,
how do you make that? How do you make that? How do you lead your client to know that's why you're sort of saying no?
by
And that's
telling them that you're busy and you're working on loads of other stuff. And, I'm doing a lot of this kind of thing at the minute.
okay.
I'm doing a lot of week-long shoots at the minute. Um,
So,
you know,
so if I were to say, Grant, can you do this thing to me for me for tomorrow morning? And you say, I'd love to, but I'm doing week-long studio shoots at the moment.
no, I would just say I'd love to. And if you'd have been able to get in contact with me a few weeks ago, maybe I could have done that. But at the minute, now, if you say to me, tonight, I need you to, tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, I want you to photograph Bob Dylan. Okay, I'm there like a shot. If you say to me, I've got a guy who works in the grocery store down the end of the street, I'm not going to do it. So it's not always, it's about that positioning,
Right.
and I think that maybe this is why there's a real power in saying no, because there's a positivity to it. It doesn't have to be negative. There is a kind of a whole thought process that's required from an ethical, from a financial, from a career perspective that you can actually take control of that. And I think that's really what we're talking about is the photographer taking control of the situation or the person rather than feel they always have to say yes and be a people pleaser.
Yeah. Um, and I do think that, so we've talked about ethics, we've talked a bit about finances. Oh, I guess here's a question about the finances. If you said no to shooting the grocer at 6 a.m. in the morning and you usually get paid, I don't know, $400 for that, and you say no, and they said, well, we'll give you $600, we'll give you a 50% raise because we really need this, what would you say then?
Um, I think I would probably have to make a decision about, from as you raised, the creative side of it. Is this something that's really good for me to do? And then say, look, I'd love to do it. I can't do it tomorrow morning. However, the next time this comes up, let me know. And the next time it comes up, my rate's gone up because the next time you offered me 600 last time.
Right.
So you got to offer me 600 the next time. You can't just
Is
say,
it,
oh, yeah, because that was short notice.
but
Well,
do you think it's worth saying yes to the 600 so that that might actually establish your new rate?
possibly,
Yeah.
possibly. I think it depends upon my financial situation. It depends upon how much is that going to put me out, that short notice thing. Was I booked to do something else? Is that, what are the costs I'm going to incur in doing it? Are there additional budgetary uh kind of allowances in there? So it's always very, very nuanced, I think. It's
What
hard being a photographer.
Yeah, I mean, this is from the writing side, but what I've found is that when I say yes to an interesting assignment at a lower rate than maybe I would usually do or than I want, I'm kind of locked into that because then they say, oh, that's what, well, we paid you this much last time and this is about the same. And I do think that um, by accepting the higher rate, even if it's kind of an emergent, with emergency circumstances or quick turnaround, I think you do yourself a favor because then I think you're on record as getting paid 50% more than you did last time. And I think it is hard to go back.
Yeah,
And it
I
puts you
agree
in a
with
better
you.
position to argue for, it's because you're just like, hey, last time you paid me this much, the money was there last time. I know you have the money. Um,
Yeah, but I think, that's a kind of what what we're saying, I think, is that saying no has a number of advantages. And I completely agree with you. I think that is an advantage. It isn't going to get you the better commissions, but it might get you better money.
right.
And that's fine. We're all about empowering kind of photographers, I think, in these situations where I think quite often photographers feel as if they have to just say yes. But actually, there is space for negotiation.
Are there assignments that have come to you where you've said no and then you've regretted it?
Um, no, and I'll tell you why, because invariably I only say no if I don't really trust the client.
Hmm.
So if I think, you know what, this client's not going to pay me on time, or this client's their expectations are too high, or I can't actually do what you want because I don't think it's photographically possible, then I'll say no. And I think you have to be willing to lose clients. I had a student recently and I passed on a job to them. And the client was saying a figure. I thought the figure was too low. I knew my student would negotiate. What was interesting was the student negotiated much higher than I thought he would. Um, and then the client instantly said, "Oh, well, I'm going to ask around to see if I can get it cheaper." Great. Bad client,
Yeah.
bad client. So you've got to be able to identify good and bad clients and avoid the bad clients because if they're going to be difficult at the beginning, they're not going to get easier as it goes along.
Well, that is for sure. And I think also, we touched on creativity a few minutes ago, but I think when you smell that something is wrong with the vision that the client has or wants, I think that's a great reason to say no. I've said no to a couple things recently just because I felt like, this was about, I help photographers make their books. And I was approached by a terrific photographer who has so many wonderful images, like truly great images, but it wasn't a book.
Mm.
It was a series, it was a portfolio.
Yeah.
And I didn't see where I could put this together. I didn't see where I could do a good job for him. And that I would be happy having my name on it. And so I said no, and there was a decent amount of money, but I have no regrets about that.
No, but that's that sense of self-worth, isn't it? And I think that's where we came into this, is you've got to make a decision that you can feel comfortable with as you go through the process. And if that decision is you think, yeah, I can go along with this ethically, fine. If you think you can go along with it financially, fine. Same creatively. The issue is if you start coming out of it and thinking, I've made the wrong decision.
Right.
And I think that's the key because too often you can ruin your career by making a bad decision. As a photographer, images go out with your name on it, and that can be detrimental. Same for writing, a piece of writing that's for somebody who's going to proofread it and destroy it or edit it and change it, or you create work and it gets put in an exhibition against people who there are issues around or whatever it may be. Don't do it. Just be really aware, be strong, and don't fear saying no.
Yeah.
I think we've done it, haven't we, Bill? We've come to a conclusion.
I think so. I would really like to hear from listeners about jobs that they've said um, no to and how they felt about it, and likewise jobs they've
Yeah.
said yes to and may have had some regrets.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in the latter. I have to say. So as always, email us through unitednationsofphotography.com. Get me on Blue Sky at UN of Photo, and get Bill through Blue Sky, where he is.
Yeah, I'm a little on Blue Sky at Bill Shapiro. I'm on Instagram mostly, also at Bill Shapiro.
And on Threads as well. You seem to still be doing a lot on Threads.
Yeah, I am on Threads.
Are you enjoying Threads?
I feel like it has a little more juice and a little more liveliness for me than Blue Sky. So
Yeah, it does seem to be better photographically.
yeah.
I'm being torn.
So
Anyway,
so I've got 4 feet in four different platforms, and we'll sort of see if I can stand at the end of the day.
well, with 4 feet, you should be okay on the standing. That should help. Listen, Bill, as always, fascinating. I think we've really gone all over the place on this one, and I'm sure that listeners and viewers will find it interesting. I hope they do.
I hope so too.
Take care. See you next month.
Bye, Grant.